So I'm going to review with you two methods for solving quadratic equations. The first is by factoring, and the second is by the quadratic formula. And there's pros and cons to both methods. Factoring can be a very quick way to solve quadratic equations, but not every quadratic expression is going to be factorable. The quadratic formula can solve any quadratic equation, but you have to remember all of the details of the formula, and there's more room for arithmetic mistakes. So I'll show you the two examples, and then there's 9 problems at the bottom of the worksheet that you can try on your own. So first, solving by factoring, we need to begin by writing the equation in standard form, which means we need to get a 0 on one side, and it will look like this. X squared plus 4x minus 12 equals 0. And then to factor means to write as a product. And so I'm going to transform the left-hand side from 3 terms, terms are separated by addition and subtraction signs, into 2 factors, 2 things that are being multiplied. And what goes in the first slot in each set of parentheses are going to be what multiplies together to give us the x squared, and that has to be x times x. What goes in the last slot in each set of parentheses will be 2 numbers that multiply together to give us negative 12. And there's a few different combinations that will do that. We know that one's got to be positive and one's got to be negative because we're trying to get a negative 12. So I'll set up a plus and a minus. And the combination that we go for has to help us combine to get this 4x as the middle term. And the combination that's going to work is positive 6 and negative 2. And just to recap why that's the correct combination, I'll just go off to the side here. If we think of doing that algebra in reverse, x plus 6 times x minus 2, the reason that that's the correct factorization is x times x gives us the x squared. 6 times x is 6x. X times negative 2 is negative 2x. Let me actually write all of those down. And then 6 times negative 2 is negative 12. And so combining those middle terms is x squared plus 4x minus 12, which is the expression that we started with on the left-hand side. The next part is we're going to use the zero product property. The zero product property says if you have a bunch of factors being multiplied together and the result is 0, at least one of those factors has to be 0. So this equation that we have here will be true if the factor x plus 6 equals 0 or if the factor x minus 2 equals 0. And then solving those 2 individual equations will give us the 2 solutions to our quadratic equation. So subtracting 6 from both sides here will give us x equals negative 6. And then adding 2 to both sides here will give us x equals positive 2. And there's our 2 solutions for that quadratic equation. And the second method is the quadratic formula, and just like with factoring, we have to start by writing our equation in standard form. So we're going to be adding 5x to both sides and subtracting 4 from both sides, and that's going to give us x squared plus 3x minus 4 equals 0. And in order to use the quadratic formula, we have to identify a, b, and c. A is the coefficient of the x squared term, which is just 1. B is the coefficient of the x term, which is 3. And c is the constant, which is negative 4. And so then we take those values and we'll substitute them into the quadratic formula. Quadratic formula is opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And so if we substitute in our values, we'll have negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 4 all over 2 times 1. And then continuing to simplify, we'll have negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 plus 16 all over 2, which is negative 3, plus or minus the square root of 25 all over 2. And 25 happens to be a perfect square, so the square root of 25 is 5. And then there's two solutions here. It's going to be negative 3 plus 5 over 2, and then negative 3 minus 5 over 2. And so the negative 3 plus 5 over 2, that simplifies to 1. And then the negative 3 minus 5 over 2 becomes negative 8 over 2, which is negative 4. Now go ahead and try the 9 examples that are at the bottom of the page. And if you find you're struggling with recalling how to solve quadratic equations by either of these methods, make sure that you come in and get some extra help.